I want to talk about Mamzerim a little bit. Now, there's a lot of different on-ramps to get to this, so I don't know. We'll have to we'll wind our way on. I just want to start with this little thing. I once downloaded the speech. Rabbi Halachic from Boston gave a speech at an RCA meeting once, like a Rabbinical Conference of America meeting once. It's a fascinating speech. It's actually online. You could listen to the whole speech. The audio is available on YU Torah. It's like an hour and 20 minutes, like a langa maracha. They also transcribed it, which is much easier to read. And in it there, he's like, it's very interesting. He's like the Zaidi of these Rabbanim. He's like, they're all his Talmidim or whatever. And he's sitting there and he says, first of all, I wasn't expecting to talk to such a large group of people. I thought this was just going to be like a handful of my close people and I was going to talk to them. Then he starts talking he talks about himself a little bit, about how hard he's working, all the shiurim that he's saying and all the starim that he has to do. And it's like very personal, very interesting. And then he gets to this interesting thing. He takes a Rambam, where the Rambam talks about Limud Torah and conflates it with Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim. That Limud Torah and Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim go together. And he starts discussing what is this that Limud Torah and Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim, what's this sort of comparison between Limud Torah and Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim. And he basically gets to the point where, yes, we try to explain everything, and we have lamdas, and we have pshatim, and we have ideas and how to understand everything. But at the end of the day, there are parts of the Torah that you have to surrender to. Meaning you're not always able to rationalize every bit and to explain it in a way that's going to make everybody feel good. And he brings over here what he's talking about really is that as much as Rabbanim have to cooperate with the milieu of the day and with what people need, and he's talking to modern Orthodox Rabbanim who are dealing with feminism and all sorts of radical, even Orthodox, from feminism, whatever. And he's writing, he says, at the end of the day, you have to conform, you have to shal to what people want, but at the same time, there are just red lines that can't be crossed. And he says, I don't know how you could continue to be Orthodox if you're going to debate certain things. He says that to me it would be akin to having at the Republican National Convention a debate about communism. That's his example. He says it would just be illogical. There are certain things that are red lines. There's a certain subservience, you have to submit to the Torah. That's what he says, the Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim. Then he gives an example. And he says, this is exactly what happened. Where is it? He says here, we cannot permit, he says here, the Torah summons a Jew to live halachically. We cannot allow, this is Mila b'Mila actually. I can't mimic the accent, but it's Mila b'Mila. We cannot allow an Eishes Ish, no matter how tragic the case, to remarry without a get. We cannot permit a Geyeris to marry a Kayin. And sometimes the cases are very tragic, as I know from my own experience. I had a case in Rochester. A Gentile girl became a Geyeris before she met the boy. She was a real Geyeris at Tzedek. She did not join our fold because she wanted to marry somebody. Then she met a Jewish boy, became He had absolutely no knowledge of Yadus. She brought him close to Yadus. They get engaged and he visited the cemetery. Since he had come closer to Yadus, he wanted to find out about his family tree. So he visited the cemetery, which his grandfather was buried, and he saw a strange symbol, 10 fingers. So they begin to ask, they thought it was a mystical symbol. Then they discovered that 10 fingers means he's a Kayin. What could you do? This is the halacha. The Kayin is usher to the Geyeris. We surrender to the will of the Almighty. This is his example. So Geyeris to a Kayin, a Mamzer, a Shesish, there are certain red lines where there's a Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim involved, where it's not possible to bend everything. It's not possible to bend it. It is what it is. Now, having said that, Mamzerus is probably one of the most tragic things that could happen, to a person. You're talking about someone who could be, I don't know, a few dairis ago, right? A few dairis ago, someone did something terrible, and now you have someone who's 4 or 5 generations removed, who's born, and from the second he's born, from the second he's conceived, he is puzzled in a way that can never be repaired, that can never be fixed, that can never be undone, right? Meaning the extremeness of what it is to be a mamzer is taka brutal. Meaning, and for a mamzer himself, all his children, all his grandchildren, we'll see that the medrash on the pasuk in Kehelis, the pasuk in Kehelis Parak Daled says, "Hine dimas ha'ashakim ve'in lahem menachem miyad ashkeim, miyad ashkeim koyach ve'in lahem menachem." That's what the pasuk says. And the medrash darshans, this is talking about mamzerim. Ein menachem zulus hakadosh baruch hu le'olam haba. There's nobody else who can make a mamzer feel better about himself, feel better about a situation besides hakadosh baruch hu le'olam haba. Now in the Mekubalim, they talk about the neshamas that end up in mamzerim, and although a mamzer is a pogum, but there's a reason why a neshama ends up there. It's some sort of tikkun and, lasted lava, whatever it is. But meaning, the opener to this is to recognize how extremely tragic the existence of a mamzer is. A mamzer is something that's broken. Be'eker you say that there's no fixing it. It's broken, it's broken, it's broken. That's the tragedy of a mamzer. Now, and because of this, because it's so tragic to be a mamzer, if you take a survey of the Paiskin, you'll see that anytime there's some sort of vagueness to the story and it's not clear that someone's a mamzer, the Paiskin will employ any type of trick and wiggle room and leeway to try to make someone not have the psak that he's a mamzer on him, to not, confirm that someone's a mamzer. If there's any, legal way, something that works with dinei sveikis, or even some, you see, Reb Kveger has a long tshuva. Whatever. Reb Kveger has a few long tshuvas, but in Simon Kov Chav Ches in Madura Kama, Kveger has a long tshuva. He relies on 3-4 das yachids in Rishonim, like 3-4 piled on top of each other, something you would never do if you weren't trying to get to that outcome. Pesach Tshuva brings down Kama Tshuvas from the Nedi Yehuda, from Reb Kveger, looking for wiggle room to not have people be paskin to the mamzerim. Famously, Reb Moshe, about all the conservative and reform weddings, Reb Moshe paskin that they weren't considered weddings. Again, looking not to be marb mamzerim and Klal Yisrael. Reb Avadia in Chelik Ches and Yabi Omer in his famous tshuva about the Ethiopians, he calls them falashas. I think that's a racist word today already, but back then that was an okay word. The Ethiopians, Reb Avadia has the beginning of the tshuva is to establish that they're Jews, and then after that, the main crux of the issue that needs to be dealt with is that if the Ethiopians are Jews, what about mamzeros? All their weddings and their divorces are not kedin. They don't know anything. They didn't know anything for thousands of years. How do you prevent them? And Ravadia builds again a case that if it wasn't to prevent a whole group, a whole kfutza of Jews being labeled as mamzerim, would not be acceptable. But when it comes to not, making mamzerim, you find a tremendous amount of push in the poskim to make that happen. Now, with that said, there are cases where it's inescapable, where someone is a mamzer and there's nothing you can do about it. And for that is really what I want to done. How do you deal with those cases when it's inescapable? What do you do in the cases when it's inescapable? Now, it's interesting that this is still a very controversial thing today. In Israel, the Rabbanut has a list called the Rishima Shchora. You don't want to be on the Rishima Shchora. It's the Blacklist, literally, and it's a list of people who are not allowed to be married. Now, it's a list. I think it would surprise you to know how few people are on the list. What do you think the number in all of Israel, people in Rishima Shchora who can't get married officially by the Rabbanut standard? It's in the low 5,000s, which is just sloppy work, because it's much, much more than that. But in the low 5,000, and of those, no. So of those, 2,500 of them are goyim, meaning people who slipped in after the Soviet Union or came from Muslim countries, whatever. They weren't Jewish b'chal. Now there's way, way more people than that aren't Jewish in Israel. Way, way, way more than 2,500. It's in the tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. That's it. Then there's the Mamzerim section, which is also a small section, 1,500 names or something. Again, not true, because a lot of them are people from the 1950s who today have Eniklach and Ir Eniklach, and there's whole families that are sprinkled with this thing. Again, the list very incomplete. And then there's the third one, which are like Chalolim and Safek Mamzer and other, more minor Yichus Pagamim that disallow them from marrying specific people. What do you say? Very, very, very seldomly. Now, so I don't have an exact. Some of them are on it. It's really a compilation. They took a lot of local Rabbanut lists from the Rabbanut in Petach Tikva and the Rabbanut in Tel Aviv and the Rabbanut in Yerushalayim, and then they compiled a master list at some point. The master list gets updated periodically. A Rav from a Mechuz somewhere in wherever could report a name to the master list. Now, so part of the reason why it's not updated is because it's very controversial, and in today's world it's looked at as cruel and barbaric, and Israel is at the end of the day a modern liberal democracy, and even the Rabbanut has to bend to what the norms are. Now, lest you think that I'm just a Kaldas talking like that, Moshe Sternbach, who's not from the Rabbanut at all, in the Tshuva and Even Ezer writes this, that it's considered barbaric today in the world to I'll read it from you in a second. Moshe Sternbach writes this. Now, what he says to do with that information we'll put aside, but he writes that. So that's A. And now B, and this is an important thing to keep in mind, is there's a concept in Mamzerim which is a very fascinating concept. It's a Gemara in Kedushin, and it's a concept called Keep Mishpacha Shenitma Nitma. Now, let's just frame this properly like this. So the Gemara in Yavamis starts off, it's a Mishnah in Yavamis, it's very, very harsh, it's open shut, there's nothing to talk about. Mishnah in Yavamis in the Ayin Chesem Beis, where's our resident Yavamis, okay? Ayin Chesem Beis says as follows: Mamzerim v'nesinim asurim v'isurin isur olam echad scharim v'echad nekevis. It's a one-line Mishnah, there's no chaylik, there's no other deis. Mamzer, nesin is asur v'isurin isur olam. Now, what is the taich of isur olam? So most Rishonim taich isur olam means forever. Not that the mamzer doesn't become mutter in 10 years, because what type of isurim do you ever find? Which psuli yichus do you ever find an expiration date? Psuli yichus don't have an expiration date. So if it says Yisraelim, it must mean it goes forever. And the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Daled and Even Ezer and Daled Aleph, the Shulchan Aruch says a mamzer is aser. The Shulchan Aruch adds the missing words. The Shulchan Aruch says, hang on one second. Mechaber says like this. Sorry. The Mechaber says, Mamzerim, Unasinim, Asurim, Israelim, Ad Seif Kal Hadeiris, Bein Scharim, Bein Akevis. So the Mechaber adds those missing words, Ad Seif Kal Hadeiris. So it sounds very open shut. There's really not a lot of wiggle room. That's like this. Now the Gemara over here right away does bring a member from Rish Lakish. It says after 10 dairis, a mamzer's mutter. But we don't pass like it, and the Gemara disputes it. Now, what's interesting is the Gemara in Kedushin, Daf Ayin Aleph and Aleph, has a whole different take on this. The Gemara says like this. The Gemara in Daf Ayin Aleph says like this in Kedushin. It says, Vayeshev mitzar from mitar kesef atiras b'nei Levi v'zikah from kesef ukekesef. Fine, that's the pasuk. Amar Yeshua ben Levi. Kesef mitar mamzerim. Money is mitar mamzerim. Literally. It's like Rashi. What does that mean? Kesef mitar mamzerim. Hatmunim bi Yisrael. Mamzerim who get lost in Klal Yisrael. Machmas mamaynim, because they were rich, so they were a good shidduch. People wanted to marry them, so people married these mamzerim families. Ugarim lehem sheyitaru lasad lava. This causes that lasad lava they're going to become tar. Because Hashem's not going to separate them from Klal Yisrael once they're already connected to many prominent families in Klal Yisrael. Now the Gemara continues along this vein, and the Gemara says as follows: Amar Rav Yitzchak, tzedakah asa Hakadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael, shemishpacha shenitma nitma. Hashem did a tzedakah, kindness for Klal Yisrael, that a family that's mixed, that's messed up, that's blended in, that we don't know, is considered blended, and we don't hold it against them. Now the Gemara continues on this. Put that aside. So now there's this new concept. It's like it almost seems like it doesn't shtim. Like the Mishnah says, Ad Olam, the Isser is forever. As I always get passed in the Shulchan Aruch. Mitzad Sheni, there's a Gemara that says straight up that Hashem has like a way of overlooking it. Hashem has a way of resolving it at some point. Now, Mishpacha Shenitma, what does that mean? There's no set amount of time. It could take 2 days, it could take 10 days, it could take 5 days. Right? Probably depends how rich they are. If the Mamzerim are very rich, they could probably become Mishpacha Shenitma pretty quickly. Before the internet, if they moved to a different town and they had a few dollars, probably it took 2-3 days, and the whole Mamzer thing was cleared up. And this is a Gemara. What do you say?
Why not 1 door?
Yeah. I'm generalizing. I'm saying Mishpacha Shenitma it means when it's lost, when it's not clear anymore, when it's not like people could point their finger and say that person is a Mamzer, that relationship is a Mamzer. We're talking about like people just know there's all sorts of legends. I don't want to stand bashmutz people, but there's all sorts of legends of different family trees and things where there's like a famous Baba something who was questionable and today has thousands or tens of thousands of eniklach. Certain mishpachos that are like it exists such a thing, but it's just a legend. At this point, it's like there was someone who did something wrong at some point. Nobody really knows. Now, how that works is a big chiddush because it's not mashma. It's mashma that Hashem gives them like a pardon. Like that's a Mamzer's absurd that says forever Hashem pardons them. Like at a certain point Hashem pardons them. Why? Because they're mixed into the best family's Klal Yisrael. The Gemara continues on the Fayin Alf and it says as follows. It says Saval Kriv Yitzchak Damar Yitzchak Mishpacha Shenitma Nitma Amar Abaya Afanana Mitininon Mishpachas Beis Atzrifa Yisab Yard and Richika Ben Sim Israel Oida Cheres Yisab Kirva Ella Av Mishpacha Shenitma Nitma Tana Oida Cheres Yisab. There was another family with Ratzul Chacham Legaloisa Av Chacham Meismeris Lebneim Al Talmidei Pamachas B'Shavua. The Chachamim knew of a family that had some sort of bad pekam in the yichus, but Lamaisa they were a prominent family. They were mixed into everybody, so they only told their talmidim once every 7 years. And fine. And this is all brought in Shulchan Aruch that a person who knows about something should be careful about it. But if you don't know about it, it's just a mishpacha shenitma. It's considered resolved. Now there's machlekes in the Achreinim how to learn this. Is it bittul b'roiv? Like how does it work? Is this bittul b'roiv? Eventually becomes bittul b'roiv. Is it considered like a sfek sveika because we don't really know who's who? Shmuel Rozovsky says it's considered taka like Hashem wipes it away. It's not bittul b'roiv. It's gone. The Mamzeris is gone. Mishpacha shenitma. So there is like an angle where Mamzeris has a way of resolving itself. Although officially there's no way to resolve Mamzeris, and a Mamzer is usher to marry, is le'av Mamzer v'kal Hashem. There is this other side of the coin where like l'asad love Hashem, and the Gemara in Kedushin over here even says that some of the greatest families, I wanted to find you the exact line, the Gemara says, one second, it's, whatever. The Gemara says, I can't find the exact line of it, but the Gemara says that the shenst and the best of families were all riddled with Mamzerim. As I state in the Gemara. It's unfortunate Gemara, the Fayin Aleph and Kedushin. They were riddled with Mamzerim and different Mishpacha Shenitma Nitma. So there is like some sort of resolution. Now, putting that all aside, the resolutions to not allow a whole family to become Mamzerim, the resolution that Hashem takes care of La'achar Maisa, what about cases where you actually have a Mamzer? There's a Mamzer. We know of it, the situation, a marriage was dissolved improperly, the woman got married again, and there's Mamzer. Meaning it's everything's, Shvatz Afais. What do you do about that? So there's 2 Gemaras that are relevant to this. The Gemara in Yivamis tells us something interesting. The Gemara says like this: there was a Mamzer. Here Here, the Gemara says like this. Amar of Zera. Hahu dahavi b'shivusa de Ravami. There was a mamzer in the neighborhood of Ravami. Achraz alei the mamzeru. Ravami was machraz about the mamzer that he's a mamzer. He was mafarsim it to everybody. He told him this guy's a mamzer. Achraz alei the mamzeru. So havi bachi va'azl. This mamzer was broken. Ravami ruined everything for him. He was crying. He was saying, "What did you do to me? You turned me into a mamzer now." Amalei told him, "Chayim and asatlucha. I saved your life." Why? Because mamzer lechai. A mamzer doesn't live. Automatically, Hashem's going to kill the mamzer. A mamzer doesn't live. And this is a big need in how quickly a mamzer dies, and if they all die, and what circumstance. Machlekes Bavli in Yerushalmi in 2 days, and the Gemara, whatever, not going into that right now. But he says, I saved your life. Now, what the Paiskim extract from this Gemara is, putting aside that he saved his life, is that there's a chiv to be mefarsim mamzerim. When you have a real, current, live mamzer, who's clear that it's a mamzer, there's a chiv to be mefarsim it. You have to be mefarsim it. You're not allowed to just let it sit. Now, the Gemara in Kedushin, what is no, that's what I'm saying. You see, there's a chiv to be mefarsim. Even though it's bezayin, you're destroying the person. Like we started with. I don't think you were here yet when we started with it. It's the most tragic thing in the world to turn someone into mamzer. It's irrectified. You know what I'm saying? It's broken forever in a way that can never be rectified. And still, there's a chiv to be mefarsim it, as I stated in the Gemara. It's come out of first Gemara Yivamas. Now, the Gemara in Kedushin, the Fayin Aleph, says something similar. The Gemara says, Rav Yochanan. Who was it? The mayor of Pinchas, Bikshu Las Bavli says, Amalahem, Pinchas who was old, told his servants, Keshani Omer Shnei Dvarim Bebeis HaMedrash Tluni Ba'arisa V'rutzu. When I say 2 things, take me and run. Ki Aili Amalahem Ein Shchid Leif Min HaTorah. They told him first one din, a chiddush. Ad Yasvi V'Kami'ayni Behu. They would be Me'ayin that din. Amalu Kolarat Zisla Yisrael Yisrael Bavel. He was Megala Mamzer. And then they ran out. And the Gemara says, other families, the Gemara in Kedushin again talks about different Ameroim who were being mefarsim in Mamzerim. So you seem to have 2 clear Gemaras. That when you have a real live mamzer, as brutal as it is, as disastrous and detrimental as it is to the mamzer, you're left with that choice. You have to be mefarsim it. Now, where does the shtal zachayis in Shulchan Aruch? So in 2 places, the Mechaber, the Ramah in Even Ezer, in Siman Beis, in Sif Hey, says as follows. There's a Ramah that says like this. The Ramah says, here it's a long Ramah. The Ramah says like this. A family that a psul was nesarav into and it's not well known, which is the din we started with. Once it's mixed in, there's a way out. And someone who knows about it, meaning you happen to have some secret information that no one else knows. It's considered a family that just has some sort of cloud hanging over them, but not like a known thing, and you happen to know something special. You're not allowed to tell anybody. Which is like a chiddush, meaning you have the secret, you know the truth. We're not saying you know something fake, you know the truth thing. Since it's nitma, you're not allowed to talk about it. So and you should tell, the chshuvim shouldn't do shidduchim with families like that. That's only a family where it's blended in. If it's not fully nisarav yet, you have to be megalan them and machrizan aleim, so that ksherim should stay away from them. So the Ramah in Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Beis, and Even Ezer Paskins, like these Stam Gemaras, that if you know of a real mamzer, a real live mamzer, you don't have a choice. You have to out the mamzer. You have to tell people about it. Now, where the shtal zachos, incidentally, is in a fascinating discussion in Hilchos Milah. There's a din in Hilchos Milah as follows. We say, everyone knows all the different brachas that we give. Wait 1 second. Where's my... Too much things here. 1 second. What is it? I know, it's not even open. It's not working out here. 1 second. The Shulchan Aruch has a din. We say, by a bris milah, we daven for the rachanimel, right? We say, Kayem esayelad hazel avav imay. We say these tefillas. So, I can't find it. It's in there somewhere. Okay. There's a din in the Shulchan Aruch in Yeridei and some Reish Samachay in the middle of Hilchos Milah. The Mechaber says like this. It says, Mamzer ki Yisraelhu. A mamzer is like a regular Jew. The Mechaber says, we make the brachas on the bris, but you don't say kayem esayelad. You don't daven for rachmanis for the baby. The Ramah says, Dr. Ramah, which is l'shitasei, haga umefarsimin b'shas milasei shu mamzer. Umefarsim at the time of his bris. Meaning, imagine that you come to a bris, the moil does the bris, you make a bracha, you don't say any tefillas, you get quiet in the room, mamzer. Now that's the Ramah. This is the Ramah passing. Now where's he coming from? He's coming from what did he say? Yeah. This is brutal stuff. He's coming from a Maril. The Maril in Hilchos Milah in Sif Chaf in Minhagi Maril is gebracht an interesting story there. It says the Maril's brother Rav Gumfrich was a moil, a great German name. Rav Gomfricht was a Moil, and he was Pamachas, he was a Mol, Tinik, who was a Mamzer. V'tzivaloi Hamaril, the Maril was mitzavah that he shouldn't daven tefillas for Kayim as a Yeled, and don't say certain particular parts of it, and to be machriz that he's a Mamzer. And Nishan Rodem, Maril added another detail, and this is gebracht in the Taz over here in Shulchan Aruch, that Kasav Maril, sheyesh the Kreis Shmai Kidar. Hashem HaPasuk Kidar Tapuchas Hema. You should give the Mamzer a special name. Call him Kidar. Kidar is a name that refers to Russia. It's a bad name. Give him a bad name so everybody will know he's a Mamzer.
Get paid?
1 second. What did you say? The Moil? No. This is not a Moil who's getting paid. He says, call him Kidar so that everyone should know that he's a Mamzer. Which is like another twist in the knife. Like Mefarsim, but not Stam Mefarsim. Call him Kidar. Now, where does this Kidar come from? So there's a Gemara in Yuma, I think on Pei Gimel, that tells about a whole story. Reb Meir Havibadik B'Shma. It's an arichas, I'm not going to go into it now, but basically names mean something, and when you give a guy a bad name, it's meant to demarcate something. Shma Kagarim, there's many Gemaras like that, so we give him a bad name, Kidar. Now, I'll tell you something crazy. You know where the name Isser comes from? And the name Zundel? Zundel's not a Hebrew word. Where does the name Zundel come from? The name Zundel was given to Mamzer. It was a name that was invented from Mamzer. It means Zundel, literally, sin. Little baby sin. That's what it means. The name Zundel was invented from Mamzerim. It was an updated version of the name Kidar. I don't know if there's any Zundels here. And what happened is, I'll tell you what happened. It became something where if you didn't like someone, you'd bashmutz him and say his name was Zundel. So it became so misused that I forgot who it is. I didn't look it up for him, but there was big Rabbanim who named their children Zundel and Isser. Isser became a Rabbanish name afterwards. Isser became a Rabbanish name. There's many Rabbanim with the name Isser because it became such a misused tool that Rabbanim, it was like reclaimed. Like they reclaimed the name and made it like a rabbinic name to put a stop to it. So, yeah, exactly. You can breathe easy. But the name Zundel and the name Issa, these were names that were invented and primarily promulgated to isolate Mamzerim, to be Mefarsim Mamzerim, so that everybody knows who the Mamzer is. Now, Ad Kedei Kach, there's a Shaila in I think the Shaila's Shuva Zera Emes. There's a Shaila as follows. He says, there's a din in Hilchas Avadim that if you want to brand your slave with like a tattoo that says Eved, you want to put a QR code on his back so he can never run away. So you're allowed to do it, and it's not a violation of Isser Kseves Kaka. And it's a sugya in Hilchos Kseves Kaka, why that is, putting that aside. So the Zeramas has a shaila. He says, the minig b'mkaimenu is that if someone has a mamzer, they let the kid run wild, basically. They let the kid become a street child. Why raise him, teach him Torah, teach him things? He has no prospects anyhow. Just let him do his thing. He says, but the problem is that the wild kids, they don't stay around town. They end up running off somewhere. They end up in some other village somewhere, and it's very easy to lose track of them. Nobody knows where the wild oats go. So maybe, suggests the Zeramis, you should brand them on their forehead. Put a tattoo on their forehead that says Mamzer, so that wherever they go, I kid you not, this is a real Shaila, and a real Shaila's Tshuva say from a few hundred years ago. Maybe you should brand them on their forehead that says Mamzer, so that he can't... now, his Nidin is like about the Kseves Kaka aspect of it, about if tattooing is Asr B'chai Gavna. His Nidin is not really in the what do you say? He comes out not to, and many places after him also are horror-stricken by it, and they're like... What type of achzarius is that? Meaning, of course, you have to be mefarsim, and of course, but it's also incumbent on people to do research before they marry someone. It doesn't have to walk around with with his 23andMe tattooed on his head. You know what I'm saying? Like it's taking it too far. So whatever. But many places now even the Marils calling him Kidar and being mefarsim and the Bris Milah, Rav Chaim Palachi in his Chuvas, I forgot which one of his Chuvas. He has a few different names for Chuvas, and Rav Chaim Palachi in his Chuvas. Machzor and says it's Leinag, okay, we don't do this, and then we don't even give this name. But Yirch this is a thing. Now it's interesting. I found over here. My papers are a mess this week. I apologize, but there was a bunch of stories. I have one of these papers here. It's from a Bris Sefer compiled by an old Mail, who writes about different Kabbalah's Edison that he has from Mail so and so in this town on this date, who by the Bris was Mefarsim Mamzer and had to run out for his life. Forget about getting his paycheck. You're Mefarsim Mamzer and you run. And he brings 5 or 6 stories from like the relatively modern era of Moilim who had to run out after announcing Mamzer. Now, so why am I talking about this? Because recently a very rare Kol Kaira came out. You don't see these very often. The Kol Kaira came out from the Bezdin Kavua Mitam Vader Rabbanim de Baltimore. I'll read some of it because I think we just said this. This is how this works. But it's as follows: whatever from the story. This is a famous story. Anybody who's following Halachic hack remembers the case of a Bittul Kedushin that happened a bunch of years ago by some well-known Rabbanim, but was also very, very disputed by other well-known Rabbanim who felt that it was, very, very much an error. And maybe we could revisit Bittul Kedushin L'Mafrei. We could talk about that at some point, maybe if anyone wants. It's not interesting shaila. Moshe, when he did use it, when he didn't use it, etc. But there was a shaila that happened, and this woman from this, slightly, not slightly, but invalidated get, went and married someone else, and now, this is dated on Chav Zayin Chodesh Shvat, Tavshin Pei Hey, had a baby, and the Bezdin in Baltimore put out a kolkaira announcing the baby's name, the mother's name, and saying the exact, tit for tat of the shaila, how it went down, which poskim were involved, and therefore, and this is in bold, underlined, he mamzeres v'asura lavi b'kahal. U'lechein matzinu chayva legales u'lahachris kein aleh lebal yikashlu ba b'levoi k'moi shekava haramal halacha b'shulchan aruch v'nezesim and beis sef hey. Shemagalan apsulun and machrizin aleim k'dei shiyif v'shemem aksheru. This is a kolkaira, you will not see a kolkaira like this very often. A girl.
Why did they put the father?
What do you say?
Why didn't they put the father down?
The father's in it too. Everything you need to know.
Is that her? The baby.
I redacted it. I just redacted it for but everything's in here. No, for no reason. I don't know. I read that, but it's all in here. I have all the details of this thing, and then it's signed by some very, very brand name rabbanim. Avram Chaim Sherman is not someone I think most of you will have heard of, but he's a tremendous expert in Geirus. If anyone's into Geirus, he's like a world class Talmud Riyashiv, world class Geirus expert. Aaron Feldman, Rali Dei Wachtfeigel, Rasher Chachuel, Sachadev Kahana from Lakewood, and many more, Shlomo Miller, and many, Cyril Rosenberg, many famous names, many Bakanta names that signed on to this Kolkaira, announcing the unfortunate birth of a Mamzer. Now, back to, we said this, I mentioned this, so this happens, and this is l'chayra, an embodiment of the chiyuv of doing it. Now, there's some interestingly, I don't know why this never came to fruition, or Menashe Klein, in a tshuva that he has, he writes about, actually his son writes that his father was once sitting with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and they were discussing the great need for compiling a master list of mishpachas, to know who can marry and who can't marry. Meaning, they wanted to not make a blacklist, they wanted to make a white list. Meaning, pay people to do major yichus deep dives, and to come up with, a white list of the mishpachas miyuchasis. Now, they didn't end up doing it, and the son, Rabbi Klein Jr. is mystified as to why it didn't happen. Probably, I could think of offhand a few reasons. A, it's highly impractical. B, I think they'd be surprised by the findings. Exactly. If the Gemara in Kedushin says it, so then it probably holds. And C, and this is the reason that they actually said, is because at the end of the day, it can never be fully comprehensive, and anybody who's going to be left off is going to have some sort of asterisk near their name, and it's not fair because you, Punkt, only had the resources to research, X amount of mishpachas that anybody else who's not from those families is, now has an asterisk. It's not fair that you have an asterisk. So meaning it was like a halbgebacken idea. It's not a fully thought out idea. It's not really a practical idea. Now, it's just interesting is that I saw in Paradise this discussion. The Belzer Rebbe once encouraged this. The Lubavitcher Rebbe encouraged it. Menashe Klein encouraged it. And they all were pushing for this type of list. It didn't happen. Now, how to feel about mamzerim? Meaning, let's say you know a mamzer who's ill. Are you supposed to daven for him? Do they get aliyahs? Could they be a chazan? Could they write a sefer Torah? Could they write tefillin? There's many shilas, and this is many poskim. Reb Moshe Berosham, Reb Moshe Steinbach follows him. Many other poskim feel that there's a tremendous amount of sympathy and rachmanis that you need to have for a mamzer. Meaning a mamzer, primarily, oftentimes, is a pure victim. Is really a pure victim. And as much as, the Torah is non-negotiable, and the Metzias is the Metzias, but there's tremendous reason to have rachmanis on a mamzer and to feel terrible for them, and to try to aid them in whatever way you could aid them. Meaning whatever type of shidduchim are available to them, be it geirim, or other mamzerim, or whatever it is, meaning other eitzas. Now, there is one eitzah that's like an out-of-box eitzah, and I think we'll talk about this next week in Mitzvah Shem, is a mamzer is allowed to marry a slave. Now, Abraham Lincoln has something to say about that, and we need to discuss that, but it's a wide-ranging machlekes that starts with Turkish law in the 1500s, all the way to American law right now. I think we'll discuss slavery and its implications to mamzerim next week in Mitzvah Shem.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.